Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream Podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Carly Martinetti. She's the co-founder over at Notably, which is a traditional PR firm. They also do a lot of creative work. I'll let her explain it a little bit better, but what I really wanted to have Carly on here to talk about is more of the traditional PR workflow. As you know, like our audience is mainly kind of digital PR, link building, SEO, kind of all rolled into one. But I do think there's kind of a lot of this bleeding of the two, the traditionals bleeding into digital and vice versa, I guess. So I really want to get Carly's take on, what the PR process looks like, what good PR is, what we can all learn from each other. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm really excited about it. But before we do, I just want to remind people, like, subscribe. The more you do that kind of stuff, the more I can have great guests on like Carly. Second quick reminder is that List IQ is out. And if you do PR, digital PR, and you're building media lists, hyper relevant media lists from Google News, and you're looking to do that, List IQ is a great tool for this. Helps you do it very quickly and efficiently. It can streamline a lot of the information gathering that typically takes you 10 minutes or more sometimes for a journalist. It's free to sign up and get some free credits and stuff. Carly, how you doing? Thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So Carly and I are both, under a foot of snow, but
2.5 for me, but
yeah,
we got
by the time this goes live, I hope we will all be thawed out a bit. Carly, I want to ask you, I'm going to kind of start, I was doing a little digging on your LinkedIn. I'm going to start here something that's not necessarily PR related. Can you tell us about Featured Creature?
Yes, I can. Blast from the past. So Featured Creature is a website that I started actually in college. So it's been a minute. And really, I have a passion for just like unique and weird animals that you've probably never heard of before. That's it. I felt like at the time, no one was kind of giving the spotlight to animals that deserved it. The publicist in me at that time wanted to promote the animals that needed one. And so, yeah, I started this website. A lot of them were endangered species, just very rare species, hard to find, right? And it actually is where I kind of got started falling in love with like headline writing and, coming up with story angles and all of that. Because again, oftentimes the animals themselves were not traditionally, for lack of a better term, that interesting. And yet I wanted to get the word out about them for, conservation's sake. I'll give you just a quick example, but there was a caterpillar that was fuzzy and white and had like crazy hair, basically. And I thought it was a really cool caterpillar, did some cool stuff. But if I were to just write a headline where it's like, white caterpillar lives in the rainforest and, helps other animals survive, like, it's okay, right? Versus I wrote the story to be about how this is like the Albert Einstein of caterpillars because it had a wild, crazy hair.
Love it.
So
yeah.
Took off like wildfire. Everyone started to know about this caterpillar when, again, like you really wouldn't without that framing. So it definitely kind of like laid a foundation for, I think, everything that I do today, where I do work oftentimes with companies that are either, not well known or not traditionally exciting industries where they might be a little bit boring, right? And it's my job to come up with, what is the story that's going to skyrocket them to fame and fortune.
I love it. Yeah, it's a fantastic website. I take it you don't use it, it's not active anymore.
Not
right?
doing it these days. No, I'm a little busy. But honestly, I'd love to get back to it. I was thinking of launching like a Substack version of it. So if anyone's listening, and they want that, let me know.
Do it. It's all about the newsletter these days. Yeah, definitely check it out. I mean, I'll put a link in the show notes, but it's worth a gander. There's some cool stuff. I was showing my kids actually they're into animals these days. So
awesome.
But I think it sets kind of a good groundwork for some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. I liked how you did that, Carly. One of the first kind of questions that I like to talk about when we're talking to people who are kind of not in the quote unquote digital PR space, is kind of definitions
Hmm.
of, you know, PR, digital PR, traditional PR. How do you kind of see what you do as different from the quote unquote digital PR, or do you not see a difference? I'd love to just kind of get your
Yeah,
take on
I
this.
mean, I think there's more similarities than differences for sure. The biggest, I would say, standout difference is that digital PR is often measured by backlinks, right? And like the number of backlinks that you achieve from a campaign equals success, right? Whereas that's not the goal of traditional PR. The more so the goal is to just get coverage in tier one media that's going to be brand building, helpful to some, the company in some way, whether that's an expert commentary piece or a thought leadership piece or a feature story on the company itself or the person behind it, right? So it's more so about just kind of like the coverage and the story within it versus securing a link at volume, which again, maybe I have it wrong, but that's kind of in my mind how I envision the delineation is the SEO value for one digital PR, and then more so on the kind of like brand awareness, brand building side for traditional.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And I think kind of historically, that has been the way. The quote unquote advantage that digital PR has had was being able to maybe connect the dots from, say, backlinks to organic traffic and
Hmm.
organic traffic to keywords and keywords to the bottom line, right? Like if you can get, your red running shoes ranking, then you're going to make more money. I think the cool and interesting part, and like why I want to talk to you about this today too, is like I feel like these lines are blurring a bit with the
Hmm.
advent of AI. It seems like, that the traditional keyword method these days, ranking for keywords, people don't really know what to make of it
Hmm.
because AI has kind of obfuscated the way that Google works, and people are getting their information from different areas, and sites are talking about losing organic traffic. So there's a lot more focus now on digital PR as a quote unquote brand building exercise.
Hmm.
And the ones that are doing this well, and the agencies that I think are really the high performers, are the ones that have brand in mind, regardless. It's not just links. So I think the thing that I'd love to get your take on is, if you have seen this, have you seen the lines blurring at all more recently? Like, how does AI impacted this,
Yeah.
your workflow?
It's a good question. I mean, I do think there are elements of digital PR, more specifically around data, right? And that was always a key component of any report that a digital PR would push is, having fresh data associated with the pitch or some sort of, research, right? I know oftentimes they would do like kind of tent pole content pieces that could be fleshed out into, different pitches, right? We do the same thing now, I think more than we ever have, in that we're really leaning on the client, or else we're telling the client like, hey, we need original research, hey, we need original data. Like that's what's going to rank in a lot of these LLMs, as being the primary source for those things. So we do, I would say, have more of an inclination to like push for that now than in the past. In the past it was more of a nice to have, and now I feel like it's a not need to have, but it's getting there, right? So I think that's a big thing. Clients aren't so much asking for backlinks, though. It's still the case where, at least in my world, like it's again, if we get it, great. If we don't, it's not the end of the world. It's more so, did we get our message across? Did we get a story in a major publication that's going to move the needle from a business goal versus a traffic goal or something else associated? So, yeah, those are the ways that I've seen it primarily play out today. Now, that's not to say that things are, again, going to change rather quickly. They
Right.
tend to do these days. But at least today, it's not that different, I would say.
Have you seen more clients interested in using PR to get into AI citations and get mentioned by AI?
We have to tell them still that this is
Oh,
even a
interesting.
thing. So I do think there's a gap between awareness of how PR helps with LLM citations on the client side and how much PR people recognize that it does. And being able to convey that, I find that people are kind of hearing whispers about it still. And so they really don't understand to this day, like, how everything works and, the value of PR and kind of the same questions, right? So we make it part of our story now more than ever to say, like, not only does it help with, everything that it ever did, brand building, brand awareness, trust, third party, endorsements, all that. It is more important than ever to have that sort of LLM through line to be able to have them consistently cite you and pick you up. So I think it's gonna happen, but still it's not reached like a inflection point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess it makes sense when you consider how the traditional kind of PR teams interact with brands versus the digital PR teams. We ask this question every year where we do this like big state of digital PR report. One of the questions we talk about is like, what areas of the business do you typically interact with most
Mm.
closely?
Hmm.
And it's always the SEO team for digital
Yeah.
PR. And the brand team and the regular PR teams are very low,
We
on there,
never talk
which
to SEO. Like,
yeah,
ever.
which I think is a missed opportunity, to be
I do
honest.
too.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that like this, because the other thing that we're seeing now is on my end, like the digital PRs now, because of AI, are able to kind of lower expectation. Well, I should say it this way. Like you had mentioned earlier, digital PR is all about links.
Hmm.
And yes, it's still very much focused on that. But I think for the past few years, there are people who have always been talking about it's not just the links that matter. It's mentions, Google looks at this stuff. And there was even leaked Google information on like how the algorithm works a few years ago now that like kind of solidified some of these beliefs that it's not all about links. And now add on the fact that AI, there's a lot of correlated data between AI mentions and just brand mentions,
Hmm.
so now I think in the digital PR space, people are really able to more confidently say, it's not just the links that matter, it's links and coverage. And like I've even talked about, in my blog writing and how I talk about this stuff is I always say links and coverage now instead of
Hmm.
just getting links, because I
Right,
do
right.
think the line is kind of blurring, like I was saying earlier. But one of the things you mentioned was this idea of like a through line.
Hmm.
And that's always really interesting to me because, like I said before, with digital PR, I think being able to measure this stuff has always been tied to keywords rankings typically. I'd say a smaller percentage are interested in just getting their brand out there, raising brand awareness. And
Hmm.
that still is probably measured by like traditional kind of SEO metrics where it's like branded keywords. How much are people, or maybe direct traffic to the site. But what are some of the metrics that you use to measure success and understanding that through line between the PR methods you're doing and success?
Yeah, it's interesting. We actually will link up with the sales team most of the time to figure out like what's going to move the needle for them. Like what sort of coverage, if they could get a story to say X headline would make their lives easier. So we start actually more
Hmm.
on the business goals side than the PR metric traditional side. um, Definitely we still count things like number of hits, impressions, domain authority, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, like I've found that if you can actually tie what PR is doing to help sales be better at sales, not to say that PR is going to be the sales engine, but can make it easier and, less of a lift essentially for the sales team to do what they need to do, then that's the best thing we can possibly help with. And so I do end up talking to, everyone from the CEO to the CMO to the head of sales and figure out like where is there a gap? Where are we, where's the sales team getting pushback in conversations? Like, is it something around, a competitor being more accessible in some way? And if we could get a story that shows like, no, really, they are the more accessible one, then it would make their lives easier. So things like that, where it's again having those conversations internally. And that allows us to also be very strategic with the types of coverage that we secure, the places that we secure it, the audiences we're trying to reach. So yeah, that's my advice. It's like always start there. If you're going to be working with just doing traditional PR, you want to make sure that success aligns early and often. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And now, do you think this is something that Notably does specifically, or is this kind of more? Yeah, I know
I
you've been
don't
in this
know.
game for a while.
Yeah, I don't know, honestly. I mean, I know we do it, right? But I do think there's probably more PR firms that are jumping into doing it that way if they hadn't in
Okay.
the
Like
past. Just
tying to business goals.
yeah, just
Yeah.
because again, I think like the world today necessitates it almost. And, with the kind of like shaky economy and all those things, like the more you can make yourself integral to business, ROI at the end of the day, the better you are. So that's kind of always been my philosophy with it. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure how many how many folks are catching
Yeah.
on. Probably after this, everyone will start doing it, right?
That's right. Yeah. All right. So one of the things I saw on your website, you had the list of services that you do,
Hmm.
and I thought would be an interesting kind of talking point again to kind of compare to our kind of state of digital PR thing that we just did.
Yeah,
It's fresh in my mind right now, and some of the tactics that people use in the digital PR space most that they say are most effective. And I want to compare that to kind of the services that you offer that I saw on your website. So realistically, the most effective digital PR thing tactics, I guess you could, it's like the data led stuff, like you were saying, the kind of expert commentary, getting your brand out there. Uh, a lot of people still using kind of more traditional press releases. Some are doing kind of what you call like the hero content, which for the most part kind of overlaps a lot with the data driven stuff. Maybe it's, just a big piece. Sometimes there's these interactive pieces.
yeah.
But for the most part, I'd say that's kind of where the most effective pieces are, with the data led stuff and expert commentary being very close.
Right.
So some of the stuff that you had listed on your site, again, this kind of helps give a broader definition, I think, to what traditional PR kind of encompasses.
Hmm.
But you had your storytelling, brand messaging, media relations, thought leadership, crisis comms, corporate social responsibility, content creation, which I know is kind of specific to your agency, event support, media training, and survey development and promotion. What of that do you say that you do most frequently for brands? And then what is, if you can even answer this, I mean, it might be, it depends, but what is most effective typically?
I mean, truly, media relations is what we do most effectively and the most frequently. Like, that's the number one thing people know us for. And when I say media relations, I don't mean just kind of like your traditional kind of spray and pray approach where we're sending out press releases and pitches and hoping someone bites. We're very, very targeted with our pitches and our media lists and the people that we're going to. And everything is really almost one to one, I would say. So, like, I'll spend 30 to 40 minutes, I'm not even kidding, writing a single pitch to a single reporter because the hit rate is so much higher when you actually take the time to research them and what they've written about. So to me, it's interesting because I think a lot of firms are still kind of stuck with the just blast everything and, hopefully you'll get a bite. Whereas I've found that, yes, it takes more time to do it this way, but it's also more effective this way. And so that's kind of the reputation that we have, I think, is just being able to like consistently deliver higher tier publications because of the way that we work. So that's number one. The, I guess, least, frequently done thing is actually probably more of the hero content that you were talking about, only because we don't necessarily need it. Like, it's more of a nice to have. Could be great in terms of pitching fodder for us, but there's so many other ways to kind of tackle getting commentary, getting, hits, so to speak, that we don't really need it. So I think often comes down to budget for clients and if they want to also invest the time and energy because it's more of a lift for them to be able to do the design and, all the things that go along with it. Especially as you were saying, there's like interactive options too. So we very rarely see that as part of our process.
Yeah. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think I've seen the hero content kind of dip a bit from year to year too on our end. All right, I want to get into some of the pitching stuff because you brought up some really good points. This
Hmm.
idea of like the spray and pray. I mean, it's the whole reason we built our List IQ thing was, we did a bunch of research looking at the effectiveness of spray and pray versus the super hyper, relevant building media lists and kind of personalizing, tailoring your pitches to people. And it's just that much more effective, as you said. Could you walk me through a little bit of what it's like to build a media list? What tools do you use? How do you identify the right journalists? And then we'll get into kind of the pitch crafting.
Yeah. So I'm pretty old school with the way that I personally build my media list. I really just use Google, plain and simple. And what I mean by that is what I'll do is, let's say I'm working with a client in biometric authentication space, for example. I will look up anyone who has recently written on a topic that I want to have them weigh in on. So, put in the keywords and, quotes, as well as the specific publication. So, like Insight publication.com, right? To be able to really like hone in on who are the writers within that specific publication that most frequently talk about that particular topic, or an adjacent topic is actually more effective usually because right? Like if a reporter's just written on a topic, they're not going to write about the same thing the next day. So I try and find like someone who's like this very Goldilocks zone of, interested in the topic, writes about it frequently, has published within the last month, is someone who's actively on the beat, so to speak. And so add them to my list, right? And then I will identify from there, like, who are my kind of best fits for this particular story that I'm working on. And I will actually bucket them out and spend the most time on those pitches just to be able to, again, like really hone in on like what they've recently written about, why it makes sense for them to continue, kind of filling in the white space with my client's point of view, etc. And so I'll just go down and kind of like make a list that runs through kind of tiers of who I think is going to be most likely to accept this pitch, all the way through to like, 50-50 on it. And so my lists are short. Like I think I probably 15 to 20 max for every given pitch, I would say. And that again just allows me to be super targeted. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love the concept of like the Goldilocks,
yeah.
journalist where I mean, I think that's something that when you get into like the spray and pray, like that's the super, nuclear version. I think there are a lot of people in that kind of 100 to 200 uh, journalists per pitch
Hmm.
zone that again just still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I yeah, I have a hard time when people come up to me and say, I just did this piece, and it might depend on kind of the angles, how many angles you can tease out, and like a lot of these like city index studies do have a
Yeah.
lot more angles and locations and stuff, and that can add to it. But still, like when you get down to it, like I feel like you could go through all of these media lists and be like, you know, this person's an 80% and
Hmm.
not a 100%. And that's where you get into like the Goldilocks zone that I think, and I agree with you. Like, I think that's where we need to be is the 100%. And that's kind of how
Hmm.
I try to message this stuff is like 80% isn't good enough anymore because from my perspective too, it's like, the AI, this whole AI thing and getting into AI and citations and brand mentions has caused an influx of people who were once kind of link builders that are now positioning themselves as digital PRs, which is
Hmm.
just adding to the noise.
Sure.
On top of that, you have all this automation from AI that's, adding people that the AI slop, press releases and all these automated pitches and that sort of thing. And it just, these journals are inundated with stuff that's not relevant to them. So I love that idea of like, if you can't get it to the Goldilocks zone, don't reach out. You're just adding to the noise.
Yeah. Well, and also I would just add that it doesn't help you in the long run because let's say, for example, this time you try someone where the pitch just wasn't ever going to work, but then next time you actually do have a pitch that's a really solid fit for that person. They're turned off, right? I would imagine by having previously been fed something that was just like so wrong. Why would they give, you the time of day to even look at what you're sending then? So I always try and like think of my future self too. Like, is this worth, using kind of,
Ruining your
yeah,
reputation. Yeah.
trading on my name to approach them about, or am I better off just holding, going to someone else who I think it's going to be a better fit for, and saving this person who I really want for something where it's like a shoe in?
Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, I know like the feeling, and I've had this in the past. I know people have echoed this to me. It's like the reason you don't do it is because in a lot of these digital PR agencies, like because they're coming at it from a more SEO perspective and they're working with the SEO teams,
Hmm.
it's very much a link metrics based thing. So it's, you want to get the coverage so that there's a big problem, I think, with the outcomes and the measurement process, and it just being so heavily focused on links and
Mhm.
quantity over quality. And I think that's going to take a lot longer to change.
Mhm.
But I would be curious. You say you're sending out 15 to 20 maybe emails for a campaign. How do you kind of benchmark success? What kind of coverage are you getting? Is it one or two pieces of coverage is a big win if it, fits that strategy, you get that headline in there, or are you looking for the big wins?
It depends on the pitch. So when I say
Okay.
15 to 20, that's when it's like no hard news. I'm making up the angle basically of what they can talk about and I think would be interesting from a reporter to write about. It's more when it's a larger campaign or it's a broader message, right? So for the 15 to 20, though, I definitely think it's more so like, uh, yeah, just making sure that those people are the right people when I'm going to them.
Yeah. Can we tease out that idea too of, there's no news and you're kind of putting
Yeah.
yourself in the journalist's shoes to come up with a story, come up with a feature for them versus,
Mhm.
this is piggybacking off of a trend or something where it's kind of easier for the journalist to fit it into their story and fit it into their readers. What's the kind of balancing act and ratio of those types of those pitches?
I actually think it's kind of a hybrid approach to that in
Okay.
in a way because what I'll do is I'll read journalists' recent work and I'll kind of try and figure out like where is the gap in the coverage that would lend itself to like a new iteration of the same story in a sense. So, like I remember during the pandemic, for example, I had a client that was in the networking space. She ran like women's networking events. And when COVID hit, right? Like everyone was talking about just being remote. Like that was the thing. And, how are people going to work remote? How are people going to, go to school? How are people going It was just remote. There was no like level beyond that. And I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, once they get past just talking about like fundamentally being remote, then they're going to start leaning into like how to do all different types of things remotely. And so networking was one of them. And so within the first, I would say, week and a half to 2 weeks of the pandemic, like I went out with pitches to CNBC, Fortune, Fast Company, all the tier ones basically, and was like, here's how to network in the age of remote. And I literally got hits in all of those publications because at the time, no one was really focused on that. Like they weren't thinking one step ahead of like what the next thing was. And so if you can kind of put yourself in that, mindset of, okay, here's what the news is really anchored on today, but what's it going to be anchored on 2 weeks from now based on that? That's how you win. Like, that's how you figure out kind of where the white space is. And even if you don't have an answer, like from your client, you can go to them and say, hey, hypothetically, like, what do you think is going to be the case here? Because oftentimes that's all thought leadership is. It's like working in hypotheticals. And so if you do have a strong point of view that would tease out the next kind of path in a reporter's coverage on a certain topic, that's
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, this idea of, again, like making news where there is none, or kind of taking the next step on a story. I'm curious how much information you need to give them. So like in this case, you're pitching Fortune Fast Company on this idea of networking and remote work. Are you, I'm assuming you're reaching out to people who are like writing features, right? They're not covering breaking news. This is not,
They're
that's
writing
not their
more
beat.
advice. They're writing more,
Okay. Yeah.
or like thought leadership, essentially. Yeah.
Right. How much information, what does the pitch look like? Are you giving them big press releases? Are you,
No.
teasing out like, these are potential areas you can talk about, and here's some copy that I wrote for you? Is it bullet points,
Yeah.
stats?
It's really just setting up what the premise of the story would be in the first paragraph, which is like one to two sentences, and then introducing who the expert is, why they're relevant to be the person to talk about this. So some proof points, right, on them. And then, yeah, I would say 3 bullet points max of what they could talk about and like why it's relevant to their audience right now. And I also try and always have like within those bullet points, like mini headlines themselves. So, use social media to sway an invite or something, as the headline. And then the bullet is, why you should be using LinkedIn to meet your next investor. I'm just making this up. But right. And so that way, again, it gives them kind of like in their mind's eye the ability to see, okay, if I went with this person, like here are the things I could talk about. Here are all the headlines that could, potentially come from that interview. So that's pretty much it. It's short. I mean, it's like no more than 250 words, I would say.
But you're pitching it with the idea that you're setting up an interview, right? It's
Yeah.
not like I'm going to give you everything you need
No,
to
no, no,
write
no.
this pitch and
Always an
see you
interview.
later.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
How does it differ if you're doing kind of, say, a data-driven study? I mean, I know that was kind of one of the pieces, like a survey, development, and promotion, that sort of thing in your
Mhm.
services. How does that pitch differ than what you're looking at?
Similar in that you're still pulling out like what the major headline would be and then some of the data points that are most interesting for them. But I would link back to the full piece or even drop it in the body of the email itself so that they have a easier time just scanning through it. But it still follows the same format in that I still want to set up like what the story is.
Right. Is the idea, though, I guess, I guess what I'm getting at here is like this thought of, in a lot of these cases, the conversation is like building a relationship with a journalist
Mhm.
versus, using them as a vehicle to get coverage, right? And it sounds like in a lot of these cases, like by opening the door to, hey, you can interview, I could set you up with a quote, I could set you up with an expert to talk to more about this thing. That seems to me like a great way to build that trust, build that relationship with a journalist versus like, I'm going to just give you everything you need and like you're on your way.
Mhm.
How do you like, is that is the goal always to get them on the phone with someone, or do you have that mindset of like, I want to give them everything. They don't necessarily need to get back to me because they're so time poor.
Yeah, again, it just depends. I know that's like not the best answer, but honestly, so like for example, I do have a trademark attorney that I work with, and our whole play with him is to actually have the analysis already done and written, and he posts it on his blog, and then we bring the news to the reporter, but link directly to the blog so that they really don't have to get on the phone with him if they don't need to. The reason being is I'm actually pitching normally with him breaking news stories. And so I know for them, like, they don't have time to hop on the phone. Maybe they do, but it's way less likely than someone who's more of a consistent beat reporter who's not doing breaking news. So in that case, like, it does make more sense to have everything packaged neatly with a bow so that they don't have to interact with me if they don't want to. I literally just had a story run in Gizmodo today that I pitched the reporter about, and I never heard from him. I saw you open the email, but I never heard from him. Didn't know if he was going to write anything. Shows up in my inbox this morning and my Google alert says, quoting my client with a link back
Yeah.
to the blog.
Great feeling.
Yeah, great feeling, but it again, it just like depends, and it depends also what
Yeah.
kind of resources you have at your disposal. Like trademark attorney I work with is fantastic in that he will actually do the analysis. Like he'll take the time to actually do that, where oftentimes clients don't have the bandwidth or they don't want to be, burdened with that level of interaction. And so that hurts us, right? Is because I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a trademark attorney. I can't do that analysis myself. Yeah, it really is like a two-way street oftentimes too, of like, is the client willing to pitch in and help, in that way, give us more fodder because it makes our lives easier in the long run for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I'd say that's mainly the way that a lot of the digital PR firms work with brands is they create, or the brand has it on their website already.
Right.
This is the study
Sure.
that we've done,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
pitching you this study. But I think the difference there, and it's something I just want to tease into a little bit more, is this idea of like the breaking news versus a beat reporter and how because I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, right? It's like understanding the type of coverage that a journalist, like they might be a tech reporter, and that's but if they're mainly covering breaking news
Yeah, it's a
and your
great
news isn't
way.
necessarily new, right? Like, so can you tell me a little bit about like just what to you, like what makes that, what makes it breaking news, that the way that your client writes,
Hmm.
the trademark attorney, like what makes that breaking news
Yeah.
versus something that wouldn't be?
So he's spotting filings in real time,
Okay.
things that would be of interest to media as it relates to large organizations like Tesla, files a trademark for something, for example. We're the first to jump on it with analysis of what that actually means with the link to the trademark filing. So that's something that's like happening in real time that he can comment on. We have that kind of scoop essentially.
Yeah.
Versus if it's more evergreen, like, why brands should, prioritize trademarking their logos before they launch, not breaking news.
Yeah.
So it just depends what we have. Yeah.
What about kind of the middle ground where it's like, we surveyed brands that, 80% of brands don't, have a trademark attorney or something,
Hmm.
it's where this is interesting, but it's not
Yeah.
necessarily breaking.
Those are the hardest pitches, man.
Yeah.
Those are the hardest to land because, right? Like, there's no real reason to write about it today. Like, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of not. It's like, So that's where I'm like less excited by things like that. I also just,
Yeah.
again, find it to be much harder to be able to get that instant kind of reaction. Unless a reporter is working on a story coincidentally where they need a stat that would bolster whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I lean away from those, to be honest with you. Like I hate everyone who knows me. So I hate surveys. Like I hate them. I just think they don't work anymore. I think they did back in the day, but yeah, like unless you're surveying like, you know, 5,000 people and it's like enterprise leaders with like a very specific like news hook today about how they're using AI, right? Like it's going to be a tough go.
Yeah, I mean, I did this big study on YouGov and all of their surveys to kind
Hmm.
of see if I could find out, because I felt the same way. And I think, again, is the big challenge that most digital PR firms face, because that is kind of the way
They've been
most create
operating.
surveys. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like we're going to create a survey and it's going to be interesting, but like the ones that do it well are the ones that have some type of timely hook,
Hmm.
and they can hook it, it's
Right.
whether it's something as simple as seasonal, seasonality, or, but like if you can turn it around on a trending topic, that's how a lot of people do it.
Hmm.
But that makes a lot of sense to me. Why, yeah, like why you hate it, and like if there's no thought to why this should be
Yeah.
something that they should cover now, having that mindset
I
seems
also find
very
it's
important.
harder to explain to clients like how it needs to be non-promotional. Like oftentimes they want the survey results to like basically say buy our product, you know?
Right.
And that also will not work. And so it's always just like a tug of war basically getting them
Yeah.
and like, yeah, it has to be interesting. It has to be tangentially related to what you guys are doing, but it can't be so on the nose as to be like, we're the only person who you could ever work with to fulfill on this survey, right? Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's just tough.
Yeah. All right, Carly, I know we've gone a little over, and I could really talk about this all day because it's
Yeah,
super
it's fun.
fascinating stuff. But one of the last things I like to ask is, what didn't I ask you that you want to make sure that we cover, that you wish I would have asked you about
Yeah.
this stuff?
I think the one thing, just because it's top of mind for me, I actually read a post on Reddit in the public relations subreddit this morning about it, is that the demands from clients seem to be much greater than they ever have. And what I mean by that is we're seeing people, day one basically step in and be like, I need to have multiple tier one pieces within the first month of engagement with you guys. Like, that's how I'm measuring success. And there's just not a lot of acknowledgement in terms of like how hard it is to actually get that level of coverage that soon with a company that isn't well known, right? I mean, that's both traditional PR and
Mm,
like, unless you're trading on already like a major brand name value, you're working from square one. Like, you really have to, establish that this is a brand worth paying attention to. This is someone who's got a point of view that's interesting, right? Whereas I do think in the age of AI, people are getting accustomed to just having things be instant. Like, it's like, you want this, I'm going to pay for you to do that. And that's the end of it. And trust me, I wish that was the case. I wish that was how my job and that it was that easy. and I could just, snap my fingers and have Bloomberg write about you, but it's just not realistic. And so I do think that we as like an industry need to talk more about just like the ins and outs of how securing coverage comes about and the effort that goes into it. And that it's not just like, sending out a million emails and people will write about you because they need to. And yeah, hopefully that will level up to clients, being a little more grateful when, you do get those wins, and they should be really happy and they should be excited, just as excited as the agency is to secure them. So yeah, I think that's my big wish is just
Yeah.
having a little bit more gratitude for the profession in general and all the hard work that we put into, do the things we do day in and day out.
Yes. Yes. It's not easy. It is a grind. But hopefully folks listening have learned some, tricks here and really for me, I think it's the framing of a lot of this stuff. And it's kind of this idea of like, it's not a one size fits all. It never is. I mean, I just did a webinar yesterday on quote unquote, the perfect pitch. And I started going through, I was going to use data to figure out like, what most people do. And I was like, this is doing a disservice if I break it down into this is the one piece, one pitch that rules them all, because it never is that the case. So
I know
it really, you got to lean on, I love the Goldilocks zone. You got to find your Goldilocks journalists and lean into the way they write and the way they, cover stories and what's in their beat right now and that sort of thing. So Carly, this has been so helpful. I really thank you for your time. Again, this is Carly Martinetti, co-founder of Notably. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and X. Those are probably my two primary channels. So hit me up.
Awesome. And I will share links to Carly's profile, websites and everything on our show notes for this. And reminder, subscribe, people that would, I'll write a review that would go a huge way towards getting more viewers, but also, let me have a great guest like Carly. Yeah. Thanks so much, Carly.
Thank you.
Good luck out there, everybody. This was great.
Bye, guys.